speakers were sharing yesterday how this rapid urbanization has outpaced the capacities of municipal governance systems. There is persistent deficits in housing, various civic services like water, sanitation, and there is deficit in governance. So there has been various deficits in the functioning, and also we heard the mayor telling how there is lack of resources, and as you know, cities are now generating 2/3 of national GDP, but they are getting just 1% of the tax revenue. So where from the money will come for affordable housing, climate resilience, and whatnot. So today we'll discuss how we can, of course, advocate for better services from government, but how people can come forward, how different organizations can come forward to ensure the access to the basic services and delivery. So this we'll discuss. So I will just briefly introduce two speakers, and I invite them to the dais. Mr. P.K. Das is the architect, urban planner, founder, P.K. Das Associates, Mumbai, and the joint convener of Nivara Haq. Sorry, can you give? Sorry. R.D. Padma Kumar, consultant architect, Center for Science and Technology, Rural Development, Coast Ford, Kerala. Resource person, Laurie Baker Center for Habitat Studies. So little more about two speakers. Mr. P.K. Das is an architect, activist based in Mumbai, widely known for his work on participatory planning and housing rights. His practice brings together architecture, urban design, grassroots mobilization, with a strong focus on engaging communities, particularly slum dwellers, in shaping their own living environments. His work spans affordable housing, public space design, waterfront development, urban conservation, alongside sustained advocacy for equitable urban policy. He is the joint convener of Nivara Haq Suraksha Samiti, chairperson of Mumbai Waterfront Center, and has contributed to several national and regional planning bodies. He's a widely published author and speaker. His work on reclaiming Mumbai's open spaces and advancing people-centered planning has received several national and international recognition, including the first Urban Age Award from London School of Economics. So I will introduce the next speaker after his talk. So sir is also very, very accessible to civil society organizations to us, and he has attended many of the meetings in Odisha. We went to his house, very nicely designed house in Said Nagar, na, sir? No. I will introduce him after your talk. So, sir, we have 30 minutes for your talk, then probably we'll go for question answer, or after two talks, we can go for question. So let the two speakers finish, then we'll have a question answer session. Over to you, sir. You have a present.
No, yeah, that's later. Let's just take it. No, I can speak there.
This is not me.
It's fine. Thank you, Deva brother. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I thank my friend Sandeep Chachra for inviting me here. It's a privilege to talk to all of you and rather discuss with you the most complex of all issues and that is with urban housing. I think the theme of your conference has been reimagining citizenship with local governance. I'll touch upon that subject. But more specifically today, this session, what we're discussing is housing, civil service, civic services, and urban governance. I've skipped the word democratic. It ought to be democratic. The underlying principle is that urban governance must be democratic. So for the convenience of both time and my idea, I'm just dropping that word. With a brief introduction, may I start that the question of housing encompasses a vast variety of concerns that we are all familiar with. For most people, access to land, the politics of informal settlements, powers that operate, threat of demolitions, lack of civic services is part of their daily life experience. We as community organizations, CBOs, NGOs, activists, academic people grapple with the complexity of these diverse issues, seeking together with people possible ways of intervention for the achievement of equality and justice. I think that's one of the underlying principles of our commitment to whatever work and wherever we are working. On the other hand, the ruling dispensation and the privileged consider people's rights-based movement an obstruction in the path of development, agenda that is rooted in the ideas of exclusivity and exclusion. But it is the sheer power of people's movements, and that's what we've experienced in this country, that has compelled governments from time to time to announce short-term appeasement plans. I call them government short-term appeasement plans, while each time displacing and peripheralizing further. These various sinister plans and programs has a single objective: to appropriate land occupied by the people and allow markets to take over to facilitate private profit. Slums redevelopment schemes are a part of this plan too, by which people are not only squeezed to smaller fragments of the land they occupied, but also they are forced to live in oppressive, rebuilt rehabilitation buildings and complexes. And I won't get into the reasons of why they're oppressive, why they're depressing, etc., etc. It is with this background that I would like to draw your attention to certain critical questions. These questions are in social, political, and environmental context. And I'm adding environmental context loudly and clearly. And the cities and the complexity of housing and the housing of the poor and the informal settlements intertwining with the complexities of urbanization and city making. And hence, demanding an integrated approach in our understanding of the housing question and to collectively evolve. And I am sure at the end of each of these conferences that you have, you're also drawing up lessons and how we can collectively evolve new ideas for the making of cities, which includes housing, civic services, and democratic urban governance as the subject of this conference states. So the 4 points that I'm putting forward before you are a sustainability question in this era of climate change, the land use equity question, amenities and services integration, and lastly, and the most importantly, planning as a tool of liberation. So I go to the first point, the sustainability question in the climate era. The prevailing climate crisis, that is rising uncertainty of scale and intensity of wind, cyclones, rain, and floods that we're all familiar with across cities in India and the world, the worst sufferers being the poor, compels us to urgently address the sustainability question. A sustainable ecology of cities, including housing, is possible when we can successfully combine environmental and socio-economic dimensions equally in the plans and actions that we pursue. As a matter of fact, the two are inextricably entwined, and neither is exclusive. Also, it is the extent of their integration and this is what I consider, the extent of their integration and inclusion that must form a criterion by which we evaluate the value of our work and engagements. That should be the measure, to my mind, of the value and engagements of our work. It is the constant and deliberate erosion of public spaces, both in physical and democratic space, the denial of access to housing to the vast numbers of people, and the rampant destruction of the natural areas and the environment that compels us to view cities and housing from social and environmental perspective. For decades, we have grappled with social issues, the complexities of social engineering, social theories. Books and books after books historically have written on the ideas of people and social theories. But we have dwelt very little on the question of ecology and entwining ecological issues in the climate era with the questions of human rights. Also of concern is the failure of the various city, state, and national governments in undertaking the responsibility of building just, equal, and sustainable cities. Today, most cities are wrought with polarization and exclusion of people and places that is steadfastly eroding the values of democracy. As a matter of fact, that's fine. As a matter of fact, our experience in cities, intense levels of poverty, discrimination, and multiple forms of exploitation and subjugation. This is why I argue that cities in India are in a suburban condition. And in fact, I go further to state, and I would never like to, therefore, in the present context, equate urbanization with city making in the condition and the state we are in, because urbanization is a process of access, of equality and justice, which the cities are clearly denying, rather exaggerating at every point of time. I'm parking this subject for your later thinking and analysis. Please let us not synonymously address cities and urbanization together, as we often do, without much thinking in most of our conferences. If there is one thing that I must state as being the most important, learning from my living and working in Mumbai, and I'm sure it's being the same for all of you in places of your engagement, it is the compelling need and most urgent for collective intervention in the current trend of exclusionary urban development with an objective of achieving social and environmental equity and justice for all. I would like to conclude this section of ecology and cities by stating how little our movements, our CBOs, NGOs, activists, academics have paid attention to this critical sustainability question. Combining the struggle for housing rights and the people's movement for liberation with ecology and environmental reality at global as well as micro levels is most urgent and compelling. Our collective inquiry, expansion of public knowledge, and mobilization around these issues will enable us to seek new struggle strategies, policies, devolution of power, and democratic governance models. One of the objectives of this session, as I said at the beginning. I now just go to the second one, that is land use equity question. But I'm parking this subject of ecology and development for you to further probe. In cities, in fact, it's quite a tragedy. When I'm talking to organizations and movements, even in Mumbai, I find that activist friends also lacking knowledge. And that is dangerous for movements. For movements must now deepen their knowledge and insight into these new complexities that we are being faced with. So I go to the second land use equity question. In cities, land is the most precious commodity of all. We know that. To quote Karl Marx, land is the original source of all wealth. Unquote. Capturing this logic, the ruling dispensation has been regulating land use to gain control and to financialize it for private profit. This is fundamentally anti-urban approach that breeds at its core denial of the right to the city to most people, denial of access, and therefore denial of the right to the city for most people. Now land is weaponized, land use is weaponized to suppress the right to the city. Through various legislative means, slums redevelopment and rehabilitation projects aim to appropriate slums occupied lands, as we witness in Mumbai and many other cities. To successfully execute this plan of the public land, a significant public asset, I call it, of which governments are mere custodians, not owners, is now being gifted at their will to private agencies. The government and the officials and the bureaucracy behave as if they own public property, and then they distribute at their will. As a result, public land, a common property resource, and I stress, land is a public common property resource that is available in abundance. And I think, Patra, you mentioned, Debabrata, you mentioned that the mayor saying that we have shortage of resources, we have shortage of funds, what can we do? Do not buy into this theory. We are abundance in land, in property, in resources. It's the unequitable distribution of land and resources that is causing this shortage, and please do not forget this. And we have to counter such ideas which has bluffed us since years together and blinded us to believing in it. A common property resource that is available in abundance to fulfill all the people's needs is being pulled away from under our feet, thereby destabilizing our lives. This exclusionary land use practice, has a single objective, that is to boost private capital. This must stop. Now, land use equity rights, together with sustainability question, that is the first point that I'd made, must form the basis of our movements. Now, in another interesting extreme step, as in the case of Mumbai, and I'm sure this is going to happen in many cities because Mumbai leads the way. And we have seen examples of how cities, municipal corporations, and local government just blindly ape what Mumbai is doing. In another extreme step, people's consent for redevelopment of their settlements is being given away. Now, the latest move in Mumbai is consent is not required any longer. That the governments have the right to go in with their private partners, private forces, and carry out the development or redevelopment as they wish. Tragically, as I said, what happens in Mumbai is aped all over, and hence I'm cautioning you that these must also form a part of our movement's agenda and consciousness. This is the way to the making of privatized cities. Please remember, the goal of ruling dispensation now is committed to privatization, free market economy, and neoliberalization principles and objectives. Today, development at the cost of fast expanding privatization of land is equated with successful implementation of projects. Privatization has become synonymous with development and more important than democratic values. In doing so, governments have divested people's power that they represent to the private agencies. This is the underlying threat. That being a summary, understanding of the prevailing political agenda reflected in the prevailing form of land use, I would like to explore and discuss possible alternatives very briefly for reclaiming land and defining land use for larger public good. These are not necessarily in sequence of merit, but randomly placed. Land use must be rooted in the idea of equity based on population ratio, not FSI-led or FAR-led. I will not elaborate these points. They'll be taken up for discussion later, but this is an important point that if we constitute 80% of the population in land use for housing reservation, 80% of the land must come to our housing development. And when I say housing, it's not just houses. Housing includes infrastructure, amenities, services. Second, land price control is extremely important. We know why affordable housing in this country is impossible. It's singly because of high land price. And hence, the state must regulate land price for social development projects. And this is not new in the world. Many Latin American countries do that. Depending on the land use, land prices, even next to each other, are different and greatly varying. That is the only way to ensure that accessible social housing, amenities, and infrastructure is affordable. And hence, there is a concept of variable land price in many of these Latin American countries. I come to the next point, which is very important, and that I call it the open mapping and data. To begin with, we must have access to information about land and land use. For this reason, movements, and all of us included, must collectively undertake mapping of people's settlements, land occupied by them, across all existing realities, particularly the informal. And when I say that, I include not just slums, I'm talking about hawkers, vendors, informal industrial sectors, economies, all informal. We do mapping of all the land occupation patterns. If you remember, Sandeep had mentioned this at the Kyoto Habitat Congress where you were there. And this is one of the things we don't do. We don't look at planning or land use from the context of existing reality. We have these fantasies that are imposed by senior planners like me and other schools and exclusive planning agencies to tell us how land should be financialized and hence used. I'm sorry? It's a bottom-up practice of recognition of the existing reality to begin with. And that's where rights issues come in really entwined with it. And through that process of mapping, produce open data to counter government's skewed data that is manufactured in dubious ways without people's knowledge, then imposed upon us. Now, please, if we have to lead movements for liberation and equality, we have to have data with us. We have to have information with us. And we have to do that collectively through our movements with the people. For people know the best about the area in which they live, not governments, not any external agency. The prevailing pattern of land use through privatization of land and housing development has not promoted public good. I don't have to prove this, we know it. It must stop. Land must be considered a public resource, as I mentioned earlier, and pooled for public interest plans. I'd go so far to suggest that land is nationalized. And here I would like to quote Karl Marx again. The nationalization of land, a social necessity, against which no amount of talk about the rights of property can be of any avail. The imperative wants of society will and must be satisfied. Changes dictated by social necessity will work their own way, and sooner or later adapt legislation to their interest, unquote. As an immediate step, and this is what I'm concluding this chapter of land use with, as an immediate step, and that's what we have to work towards for, it is necessary to reserve slums occupied land, that means land occupied by all informal activity and economies, besides other vacant public land for public housing and amenities, which is hugely in shortfall. Also through the active participation of people's movements, democratize governance models. I go into the third part of my question, a call for civic services integration. Now, I'm using the word integration, but I explain this subsequently, what I mean by that. We know amenities like education and healthcare, along with a host of services that Devabrata you mentioned, water supply, sanitation, etc., are considered as are integral aspect of housing. I talked about that and considered an important civic service. But we seldom consider recreation as a necessary amenity or civic service. So I'm focusing only on this one part of this entire gamut of civil amenities and services. I'm not distinguishing amenities from services. We play with these semantics of words, for disaggregated reasons, which I'll come and explain later. We have left it, our charter of demands does not include them either. We have left it out due to a deplorable mindset that we have inherited culturally that considers leisure and recreation as a privilege of the upper class. As a matter of fact, recreation is a greater necessity of the poor and the working people who are living in the highest level of urban stress, therefore requiring higher level of access to recreation that is essential for mental and physical health and well-being. Recreation exercises and ventilates both mind and the body, and importantly, relationships, from individuals to families to community relationships. Therefore, while recreation provision may have its own place, it must be considered together with healthcare and education, not segregated and individualized in the planning and development program for social housing and projects. Interestingly, when pressure builds up with movements, protests, strikes, and interventions, governments respond by providing some temporary relief. But these provisions by plan are provided in disaggregated form. Little here, little there, never all. Say deficient housing somewhere, some inadequate service or amenities somewhere else, etc., for a show, merely a show of their governance capability and their ability to listen to people's call, but never to provide a comprehensive and integrated option for a lasting and sustainable future. This is clear. I mean, all of us have experienced this. So the way forward is combining the idea of integrated civic services and amenities, ecology, and nature-people relationship. We stand to challenge the forced normalization phenomenon that we sadly witness. The normalization of deprivation and exclusion of amenities and services from the housing plans and programs. Also, the question is, how can amenities, including recreation, be distributed, not centralized, for enabling easy access to more people? Also, this way we begin to challenge the very idea of centralization of power. Interestingly, the physical networking of various amenities, including open, unbarricaded spaces, recreational grounds, and built amenities, facilitates social networking. This is very important. These are not just material or physical entities. They facilitate social networking. People coming together for a common interest, for walks, to loiter, for leisure, relaxation, to meet and exchange, and in matters of common interest, including politics and governance. It is a way to expand the commons, otherwise fast shrinking, rather disappearing. Housing and urban development plans, the governance models, including people's movements, must now consider these aspects as a necessary human development need, indeed, of the city and its environment. I go to the last chapter, or the last question of my presentation, that is planning as a tool of liberation. A planning as a process that we've never been witnessing as such. Exactly the opposite. Today, social and public housing, as we witness, is a residual byproduct, thus ensuring exclusion of the working people, marginalization of the lower middle class, and importantly, fueling polarization on multiple grounds across cities. This has been the mainstay of successive governments. Such industrial byproduct-oriented approach eliminates people from the process. Also, by design, developers attempt to invisibilize people. On the other hand, this phenomenon undermines democracy in multiple ways. For example, now people's consent that I mentioned is no more required for the development of their settlements. Therefore, people's rights are junked. Instead, people must negotiate for fringe benefits and small goodies, not on rights terms, with the private developers. There was a time, I remember in the 70s, when Nivara Haq, our organization, used to lead protests and all over the country. We used to lead our marches and protests to the Mantralaya or Sachivalaya, as we call them, the seat of government power. Today, we are taking our demonstrations to private developers' offices. I mean, I won't explain this in greater detail, but this is how rights have been subsumed and undermined. And so we go to Rahejas, we go to other developers and seek for little petty goodies. Mera counter granite mein bana do, mere ko thoda ye improve kar do, hum do family hai, वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह. I go to the next. As a result, the city has been constantly divided in both social and spatial terms, thereby undermining the very idea of city as a zone of liberation. When cities came to being and the working class moved from the villages to the cities, they perceived cities as a zone of liberation. It was the first time they could assemble together, which they didn't experience in the villages against the landlords, and could bargain through unions their common rights and demands. Alternately, I rely upon planning as an effective democratic tool of intervention to influence change, and this must be pursued as such to overcome this crisis of exclusion and marginalization. The most fundamental principle of planning is the recognition and inclusion of all existing reality that I talked about, not informal included. This must form the basis upon which land use and development is structured, not plans that idealize abstract color codings. In planning, land must be reserved exclusively for social housing in proportion to the population that I've already mentioned. Land use planning must be area or neighborhood based. This is an important planning point I'm making, not top-down city-level plans by such high-level consultants then forced upon us, but bottom-up neighborhood-based planning to include the shortfall in social and environmental needs. This approach would challenge the centralization idea that I've already mentioned, the centralization of power and decision-making process, also reflected in the development of the city as well. Development must, is the next point I'm making within this chapter. Living conditions in most slums are deplorable and oppressive. Coupled with congestion, low-grade and insufficient services and amenities, coupled with overflowing drains, garbage pile-up, has led to unhygienic living conditions, thereby adversely affecting the health and laboring capacity of the slum dwellers and the working people. Repairing and retrofitting, I'm underlining, many of us are deeply engaged in this, repairing and retrofitting the various ad hoc services, civic services, and the collapsing infrastructure will not work. A planned redevelopment, I argue, is the need of the hour. Redevelopment of slums has to be through participatory planning and reconstruction. And it has to keep out developer lobbies whose only interest is to grab the best lands for commercial projects. However, till people are rehabilitated in the interim stages, and I'm clarifying, in the interim stages, not as a permanent solution, municipal and state governments must budget for upgradation of slums by way of providing quality civic services and transport connections and building necessary infrastructure for roads and pathways. So that's an interim step towards the final stage of redevelopment. I consider the development or redevelopment process as an incredible means of people's mobilization and their engagement, and an effective democratic tool of social and environmental change. So we must see this as a process of engagement and mobilization of our forces. In a redevelopment project, density equity I talked about land use equity. Here I'm talking about density equity. Must be the basis of planning. Density assessment must consider not only the population criteria that I elaborated earlier, but importantly assess buildings or built form density as the basis of achievement of development justice in social and environmental terms. Now we witness in cities like Mumbai, in slums redevelopment, the jostling high-rise buildings that lack light, air, ventilation, privacy. Women are constantly under gaze and abuse, etc., etc. I will not elaborate, as often mentioned as vertical slums. Density assessment must consider not that I talked about. Issues relating to the density question are as follows, very briefly. Rising temperature. Such cluster redevelopments cause rising temperature. Rising temperature at the global level. Heat island effect at the local level, causing heat stress that affects mental and physical health conditions of people. Studies after studies have showed this. And we, in the question of cities that I publish, and I'm the founder of, we have published many editions on this question of heat island effect and heat stress due to the new rehabilitation and redevelopment projects. Light and ventilation, privacy, gender discrimination, lack of space for children to play, high-rise, trauma, attract and stifle living, etc., etc. I therefore argue, and this is what I've been constantly doing, that participation in planning ought to be a right, as any other right that we fight for, including human rights. As all ought to be. The right, this right enables democratization of the common property resources and the concept of collectivization and assertion of collective power. These are things that this right to participate in planning would entail. To conclude, David Harvey, who speaks of the urbanization of class struggle in his book, Rebel Cities, I have many differences on parts of that book, but there are also great things he's talking about, define the right to the city as far more than the individual liberty to access urban resources. It is a right to change ourselves by changing the city. He asserts it is a common rather than individual right. Since this transformation inevitably depends upon the exercise of collective power, the process of urbanization. So this collective power equated with the process of urbanization. The freedom to make and remake and ourselves is, I want to argue, one of the most precious yet neglected of our human rights. Unquote. Nivara Haq, the organization that I belong to and I work with since 1980s, believes that movements and struggles for housing are essential democratic means for the achievement of equal and just cities. That the struggle for housing is essentially a democratic rights struggle. Participatory housing and development plans and programs are a necessary tenet of democracy. It is a struggle not just for individual gain, but for building collective power and reimagining cities with collective governance. Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a couple of minutes? I think I'm just about 30 minutes. Yeah. Just about 30 minutes. So 2 minutes. There are very few slides. Not much to explain. Very few slides. Just pulled out of a poster, a campaign poster. We in Nivara Haq and PKDA Architects, the firm that I belong to, for the first time carried out a mapping of the slums occupied lands of Mumbai 14 years back. Governments had forever refused to map them because then the doors would be open for them to manipulate. But then interesting data emerged from there by which we could challenge some of the main arguments that were being made by the government. That's one of the key objectives. it also came out to light that the lands occupied under slums largely belonged to the government and very little to the private. Whereas governments forever had bluffed us about the illegal occupation of those lands and the various other reservations. We also found that most of the lands occupied under slums are also reserved for housing. And so divesting those lands, so this is what collective mapping and data brings up. And then we had to influence policies through interventions and PILs. And we succeeded to a large extent, to a great length. And you'll be surprised, since 3 years, governments then carried out a detailed mapping of all the slums of Mumbai. Today, we have every data of a slum. And these are being cross-checked by all of us simultaneously. So this is one of those exercises. We did 12 maps, land occupation patterns, reservations, deficiencies, etc. But from there, we went to proposing redevelopment plans. Not the way, because we are aghast by the development models that I talked about, jostling high-rise buildings with all its criminal offenses, as I call it, to the dignity of life of most people. And so we did physical planning voluntarily of the 2,500 hectares of slum-occupied land. It's not a small feat. An architectural firm appointed for this would charge maybe 100 crores professional fees of rupees. That was carried out on honorary capacity. And we proved that with only ground plus 5 buildings, we can achieve rehousing of all, and create a surplus double of what is occupied. And that would take care of the future expansion needs of in-growth population. So I would sort of not go into lengths of that. So we did every sector planning, variations, physical modelings, and those are the kind of maps that emerge of the way we can live with ecology, natural areas, have ground plus 5 to 7-storied buildings, etc., with densities that are tenable and sustainable. Today, SRA pumps into densities of 1,500 tenements per hectare, whereas we, middle class and upper classes and across cities in India, have a tenement density of merely 400 tenements a hectare. And this goes up to 1,500 tenements a hectare. I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, PK Das. That was a wonderful talk. And I'm sure the participants will have a lot of questions. There are many participants from Odisha, sir. So, and we work in an area. No, I'm saying all participants. No, I'm just giving an example, because just a few months back, the Salia Sai was demolished for a road, and it seems that was a forest land, and people were fighting for that, so that the slums, 500 odd houses are not demolished. But we are surprised that now the roads are running through it, but it's very good to see the land use mapping and so on, plus we can do in our city of Bhubaneswar. So I welcome now the next speaker, sir. You can sit, Mr. R.D. Padma Kumar. As I said, architect, consultant, cost board. Mr. R.D. Padma Kumar is an architect, consultant associated with Cost Ford Center of Science and Technology, Rural Development, Kerala, with an extensive experience on sustainable agriculture and housing. He began his practice under mentorship of Laurie Baker, and has worked across design, policy, implementation of housing and development programs. You should see the houses that he's designed. It's very stylishly designed houses, Laurie Baker houses. He has previously served as a general manager at HUDCO, contributing to major national programs, including JNRM, RAY, PMY, MG Narega, as well as post-disaster rehabilitation efforts across India. His work has focused on developing and promoting cost-effective, sustainable building technologies, and strengthening local capacities through training of artisans and professionals. He continues to work as an independent consultant and is a resource person at the Laurie Baker Center for Habitat Studies, Thiruvananthapuram. Welcome, sir. Sir, you have 30 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. First of all, thank you, the organizing team, for having me here. Is it a problem? Am I audible? No? You getting better? Yes. Well, I think Mr. Das has covered the whole gamut of planning, the larger points of view of urban development, urban planning issues, and housing and land, particularly in a big way. So my job, I think, is to break it down a bit and come down to the nuts and bolts and talk about the house itself, for instance, construction details, or so. The key points. About 95% of shelter shortage in India is in the EWS sector. 95%. But the nature of problem is very different in different places. We have census cities starting at 5,000 population to 20 million. That's the kind of diversity we face, and all that goes with it. Space, densities, availability of land, cost of land, availability of material, skills. So first, my point is that when we look at housing per se in urban development, let's look at maybe 7 different types of cities and design solutions for each one of them differently, not one single urban housing or planning approach across the board. One biggest challenge, I think, Mr. Das is trying to cover it in a big way, but still my feeling is that the biggest challenge we have is we don't have relevant, updated data. We don't have the information with the right granularity to attack the problem. The last census was in 2011. There were a couple of NSSO surveys in between, but none gave us an updated current status. So we should address that in a big way. Of course, housing is a human right. Roti, kapda, and makan, definitely. When we get an RTI query from somebody, right to information query, do we call that person a beneficiary? I don't think so. But just a citizen asking for information. Or a child going to the school under the right to education, not a beneficiary. But how can the right to housing person be a beneficiary? So I think first we should stop calling them beneficiaries. If it's okay, we can try calling them a customer. I'm losing my. Page just closed. Sorry, give me a moment. Yes, back. No. Thank you. You said you have slides. No, you're not. Yeah, please. So we are talking about customers, not beneficiaries, definitely. But when we talk about housing as a human right, still forced evictions has been a huge problem in all cities. Some 10 million people have been forced out of their places in the last 5 years. So how can we make housing accessible to everyone, universal access? Then if we talk about funding or access to funds, affordability, that is, we have three main expenses. One is the land, then land development, and then the house. Land is the biggest issue we know, and without serious structural adjustments and government subsidies, that cannot be handled. Whereas house per se can be addressed with much lesser levels of subsidies, I suppose. What is an affordable housing? It's supposed to be something that one can have with 4 times the annual family income. So if in the EWS category, if a family has 2 lakh income, the house has to finish in 6 to 8 lakhs. Anything beyond that is beyond their capacity. If they end up getting loans, credits for that, repayment will be too much of a burden on them and they will land in debt traps, actually getting them even deeper into poverty. Land tenure rights is a big problem, we know. Without very clear title, no financial institution is ready to provide credit. We know about the Jaga mission in Orissa, where they tried a different method to lure credit with some success. But there can be innovative methods of providing land titles to enable access to credit. Interestingly, we have a national credit risk guarantee fund, which will guarantee any risk to the banks. And the current value of that fund is 3,000 crore. The Rajasthan Royals was sold yesterday for 15,000 crores. Just for comparison. Only matra. So we should also try to look at other sources of finance. For instance, how can we tap carbon credit funds? Suppose we employ low carbon building materials technology for construction. Can we get carbon credit? Can that augment the funding for housing? How to channelize CSR or low cost international development funds? What is the state of the national or regional shelter funds, which have been in discussion for some time? These are the areas which can be strengthened for bridging the gap or making houses accessible, affordable. Cost reduction is a very important point. Unfortunately, the affordable housing, define affordable housing segment in real estate in India, talk about 50 lakh per unit. From there, we have to see how very low income families or sometimes no income families can have houses and still participate in the society. Thus, the cost reduction start with design. Use space optimally, design well so that you can do with less space and do more. Even then, you have to keep in mind 10 square meter of space per person should be kept as the minimum. Mr. Das was talking about densities, availability of space, equitable distribution, commons. So this is another area where we think that 8 persons can be crammed into 20 square meters of space and still call it adequate housing. It cannot be. Medium rise, high density. I always thought that this will work for tier 2, 3, 4 cities. Never thought it will work in Mumbai. It's so heartening to learn from Mr. Das that even there it is possible, which means low density, low rise, high density is definitely a solution for small towns. Towns that are coming up. At the same time, towns which are growing now can be planned much better. We don't have to land in a situation as in the case of the big cities like Mumbai, Delhi, or so the biggest 7, and then try to grapple with the problem of redesigning it, replanning it. I think the New York City was planned 200 years back, 150 years back, looking forward, encompassing a very large area of the city all around. So when the city grew, it knew how to grow. I'm not saying that New York has the best of planning outcomes yet. It is a big opportunity right now for all the small cities, growing cities to be planned thoroughly. So that is, I'm just trying to address the cost saving part of it. Collective sourcing, because sourcing of materials, sourcing of knowledge is a big problem, big gap. Another accessibility gap for people. So collective sourcing, bulk purchase, knowledge for housing. Use of alternative building materials and construction techniques. This is very much possible. Laurie Baker has shown it. He's lived it for 50 years and has been able to cut costs by as much as 30 to 50%, even in urban situations. So that's something which we are not looking at. And this is very much more possible when we do low-rise buildings, walk-up arrangements, 5 floors, 4 floors, where even if there is no power, one can walk up and down, still feel safe and be part of the city. Another possibility is going back maybe 40 years when they started with the site and services schemes. Many of them were of, I think, much importance, much use. Even now, I think it will work in growing cities. We provide for site and services in larger areas, let the city grow around it, slowly build in, depending on the capacity of persons, then they have much more dignity. Now they are building their house. That way they become part of the polity even better. Site and services, incremental construction possibilities. Build only a poor house now. Let them have temporary extensions to it for the time being. But there is space for that temporary extension available. Maybe on the ground, maybe on the first floor. One interesting experiment we did successfully in Trivandrum is known as the Karimadam Slum Rehabilitation In Situ project, where Laurie Baker did the basic design. It was a stepped 4-floor building. So the ground floor tenements or houses had open space outside on the ground for expansion. First floor one had about 150 square feet of space for possible expansion or usage as open space. Now, after about 5 years of completion of many of those blocks, those spaces have been used so beautifully and units have grown so well and have been adapted so well by the users. So incrementality is definitely a possibility which we should look at. Another source for funding or cost management, there can be dovetailing or convergence with a lot of many other schemes. There is, as Mr. Das pointed out, fund resources not such a big problem. Channelization or equity is the issue. There are projects, programs, funds. Can we make them come and join here where it's required? So convergence dovetailing is very much a possibility. Employment guarantee schemes, I think, can help in this in both ways, livelihood as well as funds being brought in. Kerala has, I don't know about the other states, Kerala has an Ayyankali urban employment guarantee scheme for the urban areas. Whereas the GNREGA or what they call G-Ramji scheme now are all for rural areas. So for urban areas, can we have employment guarantee programs because they are focused or catering to people who cannot work so much otherwise. Aged persons, pregnant women, persons with disabilities, they can't make so much output in the industry that they get proper employment. They wouldn't. So guarantee schemes, funds, cost reduction in construction is possible. Materials, again, belong to the commons. We have the materials. Sand, we have. Mud, we have. As community, all of us. How can we have the right share of all these resources for those who need housing in cities? We are looking at, they say, with the faster pace of urbanization that we are going to experience in the next 10 years, the housing need is going to soar by up to about 60 million, they say. 60 million houses, small houses to be built in the next 10 years, if we have to do away with housing shortage, will require so much materials. So we have to look at material usage, sharing, equitable distribution in a much stronger, radical fashion. Construction skills is something which we also need to look at carefully. There is a definite erosion of skills, particularly in cities, because of the demand-supply issue. Skills are available for tiling, for concreting, for large buildings. It's very much there. There are certification systems, higher skilled workers. But what about the small houses, self-built houses? Who will build them? Do we have good masons for them? Or can these people pay so much, which the good masons demand? So how can we augment that system? How can we bridge the gap? That's another issue we need to tackle. Knowledge. All large buildings, formal sector construction, there are architects, engineers, more than what is required, too many professionals working around it. But for them, for the underprivileged, no professionals and no professional service is not accessible. How can we make that possible? Is it possible to tap the retired professionals pool? Is it possible to connect these requirements with local schools of architecture or engineering? These are points. This becomes even more important in the face of climate change and disaster possibilities we are facing. If we don't have good workers, good technical support, the self-built houses, which constitute, I think, 2/3 of all PMAY urban houses built in the last 10 years, all self-built. Without skill and proper knowledge, we can't be very sure that these are good houses which can stand disasters. Climate responsive design, where houses make quality living spaces, is a big issue. Even when we talk about the vertical slums or even the mid-rise, high density arrangements, microclimate is something that's not taken care of properly, ventilation, etc. And they say about 80% of women, this is a gender issue also there, women are home-based entrepreneurs in the informal sector. And the amount of inefficiency that come into their production is to the tune of 50%, attributable only to poor microclimate control and low access to good infrastructure or connectivity. So these small interventions can make huge differences in the quality of life. Another serious issue in my mind is security. What happens in the case of a fire or an earthquake if the houses fall? Do we have an insurance system? Will the government be able to support all such needs in a resource limited urban governance system now? As they say, they get only 1% of GDP. So Kerala, interestingly, last month has introduced a parametric disaster insurance system linked with an indemnity insurance also. In indemnity insurance, the money goes to the household based on the amount of destruction. Whereas the parametric disaster insurance covers or provides money to the government to take care of the situation if a certain parameter of, say, climate, wind speed, or heavy rains, if the parameter is reached, immediately there is a payout to the government without any delay, so that the government can utilize that money and take care of the security issues. When we discuss access to housing, we shouldn't, I think, limit everything to the EWS categories. We have to also look at the issues, serious problems faced by, in Kerala particularly, the demographic shift we are facing of older people. They may have a house, but when does it become housing? Persons with disabilities. What happens to the child who is 40 and the parent who is 60 or 80? When the parent dies, what will happen to this person? Where will they go? The parent is ready to kill the child before they die. Such serious issues in the society with respect to PWDs, other vulnerable, very vulnerable groups. So what are the innovative housing solutions that we can think of. There are certain existing methods like integrational housing, where young and old live together. There is co-housing solutions, which is becoming more and more market-driven now. Assisted living. We are designing some of the first integrated rehabilitation centers in India, in Kerala now, for those parents who want to put their children with disabilities in there and die peacefully. All those issues we need to discuss. I have some more time? Okay. I'll just finish with one more point. That is rental housing. I don't think we have to look at ownership of houses everywhere, even for higher income groups, because the trend is changing world over with change in economy, outlook, societal connections, family structures. People tend to have interest in owning houses less and less. What happens there? That is, how do we address that? Yet another thing is, more than 30% of our urban spaces are occupied by migrants, some temporary migrants, some permanent migrants. They would require students, they will require rental housing. So that is another area which we need to address. I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I invite Mr. P.K. Das to the dais also. So we had two very interesting presentations on housing, civic services, democratic urban governance. So anyone who has questions? Wow, very nice. So we'll take 4 questions now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Okay. People who have not spoken before, please.
Hi. Hello, sir. Hi. I have a question to Padma Kumar, sir. You spoke, actually, you have spoken about this a lot in your speech. Laurie Baker emphasized the use of local materials for the infrastructure. But somewhere I feel like we have lost that. And I come from Pune, and there is this vibrant culture of vadas. And now there are only concrete blocks left, and the vadas being demolished and they're replaced by the concrete blocks. So why is that so? And is it because the concrete is readily available, or is it something else? I just wanted to ask that. Yeah.
Then one, maybe take 3 questions.
Hi, sir. My name is Adya, and I'm a student of the Urban Center, SIRP as well. So I just wanted to ask about something that came up to my mind recently. We had a session where we mentioned a piece of land kept in matter of emotional attachment. So recently, I have been noticing a phenomenon happening in Kerala where houses are there, but there is no people. I kind of termed it as ആളൊഴിഞ്ഞ വീടുകൾ or houses without people. And I kind of say it is a waste of, resources, services, and as well as land. So what is your say about this? Like many of the people are abroad, but they keep this kind of infrastructure in terms of emotional attachment.
Hello everyone, this is Thiru from Tamil Nadu. So I have a question around this ecological city. So who define an ecological city and marginalized community are part of the vision? Like for example, if they're part of the mission as well as, if they're part of the mission as well as, how much voice they have in this making the decision, the power in this ecological city, that one. Then second one is that when it's coming to housing, so we need to develop the relationship individually as well as the community wise. Like as outsiders, how do you, build the relationship with the community people with the care? So these are two questions I have. Yeah.
Yes. So I think I'll begin with, oh, no, the last one is yours. So about materials, you see, local material usage is great when we have local materials. But urban areas don't have local materials, particularly large cities, we don't have that. Fortunately, I'll put it that way, demolished buildings or C&D waste is a big resource which we can tap in cities. So there are now methods being developed, recycling. So that is the only resource a city can offer for as a construction material. In older situations, Vada kind of time, situation was very, very, very different. And even the Vadas were built, I don't think, not entirely of local materials. But coming back to Laurie Baker, the idea is that you look at the locality, you look at the context closely, choose the right material and technology for your purpose. That's the idea. So use C&D waste, use resources in the city, women, semi-skilled workers, to convert that into blocks, build houses. As in that answers to your part partially. And the second question was about vacant houses. I think India has about 11 million vacant houses. Kerala has 1.5 million. 11, 15 lakh, we don't have the right figures. Yeah, yes, 11 lakh. 11 lakh houses lying vacant. We should tax them. Yeah, yes, he was there on the commission. And so we should tax not only the vacant house, we should tax vacant land also. Beyond a certain period of time, if the land is not put to productive urban use, if it's just lying there for emotional purpose, they have all the right to keep it, but pay tax. Is that, yes, thank you.
What? Can he repeat the question?
Hello. Say. Yeah. My question around like when it's coming to ecological city, who defined the ecological city? Is there marginalized community was part of that? If we're part of the marginalized community, how much power they have in this decision making process? When it's coming to the relationship building with the community planning or housing, so like how to? There is a lot of people coming from outsiders. So outsiders they don't have the lived experience of the marginalized community. So how they can build relationship with the community people? That one. Then second. Yeah, outsider, they don't have lived experience. How they are going to build relationship with the community people with the care? Yeah, you mentioned the care as well as like what is mean by urban care? Yeah.
There's a very interesting situation that we used to face in Mumbai, and that's quite common in many cities. The slum dwellers were against pavement dwellers. The pavement dwellers were against the nomads. जो जगह पकड़ा वो superior है. The other was to be discriminated. It's a very peculiar, political situation that we face. So when you say the outsiders come in and the locals, how the locals will merge with the outsiders, it's a complex question. But
But that's where the community organization and political movements must happen, because the enemy of both is one. They are not enemies of each other. That is what has to be understood. And if the enemies is common, then they have to come together to fight that enemy, not separately but together. So that's I mean, I would sort of leave that answer at that. There can't be a definite answer. Movements and organizations are forever evolving. So there is no prescriptive method or idea that can operate. Well, I'll prescribe and you take it up there. It has to evolve through the movement. It's dynamic. And that's what we call it, democratic and participatory. On the other front, the relationship between a settlement, particularly the working people or the marginalized people, and ecology is a much more complex process. If we actually look back in history and culturally, there was always a very deep relationship between ecology, environment, and life. Cultural patterns always evolved around nature. Agriculture till today, many of the festivals, cultural ideas all emerge from agriculture, from cultivation, including dance forms, art, music, literature, all of them. So there was that very deep innate relationship, which in urban centers gets severe on number of counts. One or two of those counts I have explained, that the agency for development is not the people. It's an external agency, right? Who by force has mandated the responsibility or has been forced upon with a mandate of development. So it takes away people from it. So the relationship of people with places is constantly severed. They're in a constant state of flux and uncertainty, right? In that state of uncertainty and flux and immediate need of shelter, which is an urgent and immediate need, the larger issues get buried. It's not that they've forgotten those connections, but they don't come up, they don't surface. And that is, I feel, is the responsibility of or idea of a political movement. A political movement has short-term needs and demands and has a long-term perspective of radical and structural change. The battle is always at both levels simultaneously. And these are extremely slow processes. They can't happen overnight or with one fight or one example. They have to be endured over long periods of time. As I said in the first part of my answer, it has to evolve. So I would sort of leave it at that. But an external condition such as the climate crisis has now compelled us to take that as a priority as well and relate it to the immediate needs and demands. Because the immediate needs and demands are also threatened by the fact of the climate crisis. So that's the connection. That's the relationship that we have to explain and understand.
Oh, thank you. We had few more questions. Can we discuss over tea? Because the next the next session has 3 speakers. So can we discuss over tea, please? Thank you, Mr. P.K. Das. Thank you, Padma Kumar. It was very nice to hear your discussion. Sorry. We have some gifts.
In cash?
Not in cash, in tea bags.
The cash is the currency. It is uncashable. I love tea. Thank you. Maybe together. Maybe.
Yeah, together.
Yeah.
Well, I said.
Yeah.
Explain what.
The explanation, it's.
When are the-
It's. 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 It's.
When are the-
diverse backgrounds. And the session will be moderated by my colleague, Mr. Joseph Mathai, who heads communications at ActionAid. I will quickly share the introductions of the speakers that we have with us for this session. We have Mr. Sangram Khopade, who is a media professional and civic activist from Pune. He's been one of India's top radio jockeys for the last 24 years. He's won over 23 prestigious national awards for Best Radio Jockey and Best Radio Show, Digital Historian of the Year, and a Guinness World Record. Editor, he's been an editor, columnist, podcaster, and social activist. Sangram has appeared on MTV, NDTV, CNN, IBN, and BBC, and international radio stations like BBC London and Triple M Australia. He is the co-founder of Sangram Punyasathi Foundation, a non-profit organization that works for a better Pune. In 2024, he published a groundbreaking 150-page report on Pune's civic issues called Pune Model for Governance. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Sangram Khopade. Please join us on stage. Next, we have Ms. Anjali Oja, who is a senior journalist with PTI. She is a practitioner working at the intersection of public policy, governance, and social development. Her work focuses on engaging with questions of equity, participation, and institutional accountability, particularly in urban and development context. She's been involved in research, advocacy, program implementation across sectors, contributing to initiatives that strengthen democratic processes and improve access to public services. Thank you, Ms. Anjali, for being with us. Welcome. Yes, a bit louder applause would be very nice and more welcoming. Yes, thank you. Lastly, we have Dr. Sridevi P. She's an assistant professor and director, School of Film Studies, TE Malayalam University. She's been awarded the Kerala Chalchitra Academy Fellowship for research on dance, choreography, and cinema. Beyond academics, she has directed 3 documentaries and actively contributes to landscape of film festivals. She served as the director of the international film festival called Darshini. Unfortunately, her train was late this morning, so she will be joining us in the middle of the session, and we'll have her deliver her intervention last. With that, I hand it over to Mr. Joseph Mathai to lead us through this session. Thank you.
Could I just start today's proceedings with this poem by Bertolt Brecht? General, your tank is a powerful vehicle. It smashes down forests and crushes 100 men. But it has one defect. It needs a driver. General, your bomber is powerful. It flies faster than a storm and carries more than an elephant. But it has one defect. It needs a mechanic. General, a human is very useful. Human can fly, they can kill, but they have one defect. They can think. So this goes back to the theme of people's protagonisms. And as we heard from P.K. Das ji, about the fact that very often the people see their immediate enemy, the immediate threat as the enemy. He talked about how slum dwellers see pavement dwellers as the enemy, pavement dwellers to the recent migrant as the enemy. So we need to understand how people think, how they see what is apparent, and how there's a need to help them see what is behind, what are the processes. What P.K. Das said, the common enemy that will unite the slum dweller, the pavement dweller, and the recent migrant. So it's in this process that this session is about how do we communicate the ideas that we have sharing over here with a wider population. How do we get social movements? And this is also a point that P.K. Das ji has talked about, the need for social movements to develop knowledge and insight to ensure that the demands that they make aren't, painting ourselves into a corner, but stepping stones to, ongoing processes for urban justice and for the social and ecological justice for all. And we've got this wonderful panel. I've had an opportunity to speak to both of them, and they really sort of, sort of are going to be able to bring this flow, because Sangramji will start off by talking about how how we need, in this polarized atmosphere, this polarized media context, how we should address the other, how we should put forward a viewpoint which will further this cause of just urban futures. And Anjali ji will, from the lens of a journalist, speak about the need to spread those stories to visibilize the possible futures. And without any ado, I will now request Sangramji to please present. And as says the PPT that Sangramji is giving, we can join the audience. Sangramji. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Ice, thanks for that very generous introduction. After listening to my professional journey, you might think that I've always been a very good or decent communicator. But let me take you back to when I was your age, and I was in law school. I didn't complete law school, but perhaps you'll figure out why I could not complete law school. During one of the practicals at this law school in Pune, the external examiner asked me, he said, tell me something about the laws related to Constitution. That's like a full toss for a law student. Talk about the Constitution. So I started talking about it and I said, look, that's the most important thing in our society. Nothing else matters more. And as I continue to talk about Constitution, the external examiner's face started to turn red. Steam started coming out of his ears. And it was only later on. I mean, I passed in that particular practical because my father was a very senior IPS officer. He was in service then. So I think he passed me because of that. But then he told a lot of people that this boy is very strange. Perhaps he's on drugs. Because while I was asking him about laws relating to prostitution in India, he was talking about something else altogether. It was an honest mistake for me to make, but if you imagine all of the answers I gave for Constitution in the context of prostitution, and the last 24 years after that, I've been trying to communicate better. And communication starts not with saying what you want to say, but trying to understand what the other is trying to ask you or say. Okay, let's start with a basic question. What is the difference between humans and animals? Chalo, haath upar karo. Basic difference between humans and animals. Somebody put your hand up. Kuch to hoga? Yes, ma'am.
அனிமல்ஸ் வந்து சுதந்திரமா இருக்கு. இப்போ நிலைமை வந்து மனிதர்கள் வந்து சுதந்திரமா இல்ல.
Somebody quickly translate for me, please. Yeah. We have lots of dogs, cats. Anjali has 4 cats. Of course, it looks like she has been kept by the 4 cats. That's a different issue altogether. But animals are not freer than us.
Humans communicate verbally.
Humans communicate. So do whales, elephants, chimpanzees. They also communicate. Critical thinking. How many people do you know, aside from your classmates, that actually indulge in critical thinking? Or okay, there is a possibility that humans can think critically. What else?
Language.
Language, okay. But again, all of these other animals, especially mammals, seem to have rudimentary language as well.
Animals.
Huh? Humans as animals are also social beings. Yeah, come on, yeah. Also, once you get out of your college, you'll realize that a lot of people are very antisocial.
Animals animals adjust to the environment.
Where are you? Sorry.
Animals adjust to the environment, whereas human beings make themselves how comfortable the environment. Like
Actually, if you've ever had a dog or a pet animal or a horse or anything like that, they are far more lazy, comfortable than us.
Humans have the capacity to be reflexive. Reflexivity.
Reflexive thinking.
Animals, they just respond to the external stimulus.
So you, both of you saved the day, because I was now coming to the conclusion that a lot of you are either not fully human or there is no difference between you. But you guys are right. I mean, it's critical thinking. It's reflective thinking. It's meta thinking. It's thinking about thinking. So animals can think, but they can't think about their thinking, right? That's the basic difference. So now let's do a quick test of your critical thinking, of your in general thinking. If you want to be in the top 10% income earners in this country, what is the minimum you have to earn every month or every year, let's say, to come into the top 10%? Okay, I'll give you some options. Is it 3.5 crores? Is it 35 lakhs, or is it 1.35 lakhs? It's 1.35 lakhs per annum. You guys they're hanging out with very poor people, I think. Come to big cities sometime. Come to Pune. Come to Mumbai. See, now here's the problem with asking these kind of questions in Kerala. The problem is that you are so far away from the national averages in terms of education, literacy, just being smart people, that you don't know what the national average is. 35 lakhs. Okay, how many say 35 lakhs? Quickly count, quickly. I square count. How many? Sir, your hand is up to here. Okay. 1.35 crores. Only two people. Okay. And let's say 1.35 lakhs is too little, no? Let's say 20 lakhs. How many for 20 lakhs per year? Okay. Let's look at globally. How many 1-year-olds are vaccinated against at least one disease? I'll give you 3 options. How many 1-year-olds globally? So it includes Africa, it includes Uttar Pradesh, it includes all of these areas, are vaccinated against at least one important disease. Is it 25%, 60%, or 88%? Let's start with 25%. 25%. It's a guess. It's all right. You can just put your hand up. 60%. And finally, 88%. One lone ranger we have. So what is your name? Sorry? Ayash. Ayaz आप बहुत आशावादी विचारधारा के लगते हैं. Very optimistic outlook you have. Okay, here's the thing. I had a bunch of more questions, but I think we've gotten a sense of how much critical thinking we have in this room. So if you want to be in the top 10% income earners in this country, you need to make about 32,000 rupees a month, which is about 3.8 lakh rupees a year. It's not in crores. It's not in 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs. What are we talking about? This is my India. 90% of Indians earn less than 32,000 rupees a month. Cool? And 88% of children across the world are now vaccinated for at least one major disease. It's that whooping cough, diphtheria, and one of those. 88% are. So why is it that a room full of scholars, a room full of rational, critical, reflective thinkers can get basics of our country or our world so wrong? Why is that? Because you get your information from the media. There's a great study done by News Laundry and Oxfam which talks about who heads media. Everybody knows who owns media, right? Big capital owns media. But who runs it? Who is the managing editor? Who is the news editor? Who is the anchor? Who are the panelists? This study you have to go through and understand completely. It basically says that a majority of it is controlled by upper castes and males. So women have a smaller voice. A Muslim woman, an Adivasi woman, an SC woman, a Christian woman has almost no voice in national media, in media that counts. And this is where you're getting all of your information from. Now, there's one more problem with information that comes to you. It's got to do with the way information itself is. One is that now there is a complete overload of information. There was a time when information wouldn't reach people or people didn't have access to information. Now there's too much information and then you don't know what to do with it. We also tend to present our data scientifically with figures, with arguments, with logic. And people find that they have a disconnect with that because people think, bhai, this doesn't connect with me. This is not me. This is not for me or about me. Most importantly, people don't think that it's about me. How many here have ever driven a car or ridden a motorcycle without the seatbelt or helmet? Everybody, no? To explain to you, seatbelt in the car, helmet on the bike. Some people are, I have never worn helmet while driving. Cognitive disconnect. Now, why is that? Is it because you don't know better? You know better, right? You know that this is what you're supposed to do. But you also know that this accident is never going to happen to me. It's going to happen to somebody else. We just had a cigarette break before before this session during the chai break. You know why? Because I know it causes cancer, but it's never going to cause cancer to me. It will always happen to somebody else. When you talk about issues like climate change, when you talk about issues like capitalism, crony capitalism, crumbling cities, destroyed infrastructure, and the fact that 90% of us earn less than 32,000 rupees a month. Let's not get into what the median for India is, where 50% is at, where the last 10% is at, and let's not even get into where the top 1% is at. I'd urge all of you to go, especially the first row, because you're, of course, towards the ends of your careers. I mean, not just because you've spent a lot of time, but some of the shit that you guys have been saying, your careers are over. I include myself in that as well. But go and look up something like the Global Rich List website, put in your monthly, yearly income, put in your assets also, and you'll realize that a lot of us are already in the top 1% of the country. You can go and ask, you check your parents' worth also. Some of your parents will also definitely be in the top 5 or 1%. You're far richer than you think you are. But when we talk about all of these big issues, what happens is people like me in the media, me or Anjali, all of us, or Tikendra as an activist, we keep talking, "Arey, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai, this is happening, that's happening, this shouldn't have happened." And what happens is people get, sorry, you're in the way of my clicker. What happens is you get doom fatigue. Again, people start saying, oh my God, these issues, climate change, such a huge issue that, boss, I can't do anything about it. It's too late for me. Or me personally, one person can't do anything. So you get fatigue, you become numb to all of these stories. I think it was Stalin who said, one death, who knows this quote? One death is bad news, 2 deaths are a tragedy, but 1 million deaths is a statistic, right? So that's what happens to human minds. We are not made for big numbers and big figures. So this is another problem that we are now facing, where when we are giving more information, instead of people getting inspired to come out and act, people are saying, okay, fine, I'm just going to check out. I just don't care anymore. So I lied to you in the very beginning when I said that humans are rational animals, that critical thinking, reflective thinking is what sets us apart from the animal kingdom. If that were true, then a lot more of you would have gotten those questions right. Because if this room can't get those answers right, then what is the other cohort that you think that will know better than you guys? We think we are rational creatures, but we're actually not rational creatures. We are rationalizing creatures. You know how the human brain was developed? You know how we got this critical faculty of ours? It happened through evolution. It happened through thousands and thousands of years, generations and generations of human beings living in the jungles, on the savannah. It did not happen in cities. This whole concept of cities, government, development plan, DP, budgets, they're all very new concepts. They're a couple of 100 years old, but the human brain is thousands, tens of thousands of years old. And what was the human brain made for? It wasn't made to stand in front of a podium like this and give bhashan. It wasn't made to sit here and listen to statistics and look at this PowerPoint presentation. It was made for a very simple thing. When I see something, how do I respond immediately? Do I freeze? Do I fight? Or should I take flight? For thousands of years, that was the only thing that kept us alive. And people like, let's say me, who likes to think a lot, could not have survived back then. I would not be able to procreate and pass on my genes if I sat around thinking. Now, think about this. 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, somebody in my tribe, in my village told me that the other village has started something new called agriculture. You know that farming agriculture is 12,000 years old. And I said, oh, very good. I must go check out what this new thing is. Apparently, you just throw shit at the ground and then wait for things to grow. You don't have to go hunt or anything. And you can store whatever you get out of it. And now I'm crossing the jungle that's in the middle of these two villages, my village and where there is now agriculture. And suddenly in the bushes, I hear a sound. Here's what I do. Here's what I would do. I would sit down on the ground and in the mud with a stick, I would start making the statistical probability of what that sound meant. Thank you, sir. Did the sound mean that it is, let's say, a rabbit, which is incredibly tasty, right? So I have now taken the probability. Last 3 times, somebody from my village went to the other village, they heard the sound and it was a rabbit. But there were 2 times when it was actually a tiger, so that person died. But 4 times there was nothing. It was just the wind against trees. So I sit and calculate the probability. Do you think I would have survived? Of course not. The person who immediately said, man, this sounds like danger, I need to get out of here and ran, is the one who survived. There were no Tinder apps back then. You didn't need them. Then procreated and then passed down those genes as well. That is who humans are. That is what we are, because we make instant judgments. And in the modern world, you have already decided which side you're on through your upbringing, through WhatsApp, through your parents, through your relatives, through your school, through your college, through your friends, through people like me who are here. And you've decided that this is what I believe about something. And then your brain, your thinking brain, acts as your own press secretary, comes out and justifies what you have already decided, whether it's on an issue or about a decision. That is how human brains work. And which leads to certain issues in our heads, like the confirmation bias. How many have heard of the confirmation bias? Basically, when you go out to the world and look for evidence for anything, you only look at the evidence that justifies your own current belief about something. And I'm not just talking about who is a better cricket player, this one or that one. I haven't seen cricket in 20 years, so I don't know. It's about important things like religion, politics, ideologies, love, hate. There are lots of these problems with our thinking. There's the halo effect, where just because I'm 6'1" and look a certain way, you'll probably, or speak a certain way, you'll probably ascribe to me qualities that I may not have. But you'll assume, this guy must also have those qualities. That's the halo effect. There are echo chambers which you're aware of. Endowment effect is another thing. Something that I already have, I have made or I own. I put more value on that rather than the exact same thing that somebody else has. So when I'm selling my car, I don't sell it for the value of a 20-year-old Toyota Corolla. That's my car. I will not sell it for the book value. I will sell it little more extra because I owned it. Arey, I know how the car drives. It's the same thing with our ideologies also. Our ideology is more important to us than other person's ideologies because it's my ideology. So I think it has to be a little bit better. There's other things that I want you guys to, when you get time, sit and study in this whole critical thinking sphere. There's something called the fundamental attribution error, where if I am late to something, then it is because there was traffic, because I had an important thing to do, because my mother or father was ill. But when somebody else is ill, when somebody else is late, then that is because that person is a duffer. That person is always late. That person doesn't have professionalism, doesn't have any value. So this is the problem when we talk about ideologies. This is the problem when we think about how the world works. So the real fundamental important difference between humans and animals, I think, is not rational critical thinking, but it is what Einstein told us. Who remembers the famous Einstein quote about what is more important than knowledge? Something is more powerful than knowledge, he said. Kaun batayega? Wisdom, no. It's imagination. No other animal can imagine. We have in our frontal lobe, we have the prefrontal cortex. I'll tell you what it does. It's very basic, but hang on. What time is lunch? What's for lunch? What is something good? Arey, clap, yaar. One round of applause for this. I have never heard this kind of a menu in any place that I have spoken at in Maharashtra or Delhi or across the country. So I'm already sold on you guys. But that fish curry, when you pour it onto the rice, and then you mix it and then you take that first. See, this animals can't do. You just had the first morsel of your lunch without it being served. So humans can get experiences without actually having to do something. And that is the difference between humans and animals. So how do you use that in your communication? How do you use that when you're working in urban spaces? That is what I have tried to do over the last many years. Just a few 5 or 6 quick learnings from that time. If you want to be a radio professional, and by the way, I've just quit my job after 24 years. It's my last 1 month or so. Only one person clapping. Clap, yaar, everybody. Enough money I have earned. And people till date come and ask me that my child wants to be a radio professional like you, or I want to go on radio. What should I do? What do you think is the #1 quality of a great radio jockey or a TV presenter or any kind of public communicator? What's the most important thing you need? Imagination. What else? Listening. Voice. What else? What else? Yes, ma'am. Confidence. Yes. One sec. Presence of mind. Okay. Energy. Connection. What? Sense of humor. Excellent. All correct answers, all good answers. But the most important thing, if you want to succeed as a communicator, is that do you like people? Do you genuinely like people? Are you actually wondering when you meet people, what must this person be thinking about? What are his or her dreams, aspirations, fears currently in life? If you don't wonder about that, then you should not be a communicator. You cannot be a good communicator. We have a lot of self-obsessed people currently at the highest offices of our country who we think are good communicators, but they're not because they're self-obsessed. To be good communicators, you have to look out and try. So that's the very first thing that I want you to figure out. And from that, if you like people, then the next question is, do people like you? And this, I have a bone to pick with all of my fellow activists, that some of them just don't come across as likable. Yeah, why? Because they're so passionate about their issue that they seem to bulldoze everybody around and don't entertain any, different kind of thought or doubt. So you have to like people and you have to be likable yourself. The second important thing is you have to know your audience. So I work in the slums of Pune. Can somebody guess how many slums there are, distinct individual slums in a city like Pune, just in the old, the municipal corporation areas? 100, 200, 300, 400, 500? There are 563 distinct slums in my city, 563. So I work in all of them, and this very interesting stuff that we are doing through my foundation. So there, once I went to this slum and I went prepared for questions like, sir, where can we get scholarship? Because all youngsters were there, right? Or something like that. What should I do for jobs? The 17-year-old girls, the first thing they ask me is, why are we letting AI come into our country? And this is a year and a half ago, not today, when we know that it'll take away jobs. I was taken aback because I went with my middle class, upper middle class. Well, we should stop calling ourselves middle class, upper middle class background, thinking, how much will they know? And I'm going there like one Mahan Guru to give them gyan. First question bowled me over. Do you know your audience? Oftentimes when we communicate, we try to, because we know that a lot of what went on before in the past is bad, it's regressive, it's useless, it has to be thrown away. We try to throw the entire past away. We try to make a clean break with tradition because we are modern, because we are scientific, right? We are rational. And that's a big mistake. So while talking about the rivers of my city, the plight of the rivers of my city, instead of talking only about how much sewage is put into or what is the oxygenation level or the biodiversity in and around my river, I did a great program talking about how Ramayana is a love story between Ram and rivers as well. There's great passages in the Ramayana where it's essentially a love letter to nature and to rivers. Now, I myself have never read that. So when I found this expert who talked about it, I went back to the Ramayana and read it and realized that if you package it like this, that look, saving the river is not just about the future. It's also about the past. This is where we come from, because we're all, our tradition, our religion is supposed to be close to nature. That really resonated with my audiences, and that really created some kind of impact. So you have to find out what are things that are rooted in their beliefs and their traditions. The other thing to do is to humanize the other. Now, when non-Muslims hang out and meet Muslims, at least in my city or my state, tell me when? When do non-Muslims hang out with Muslims publicly? During Eid, when there's a festival, right? All of us activists will say, oh, Eid, we have to celebrate together and all that. So what we do essentially is that, so the Muslim is only equal to Eid. So a person of a religion is only equal to that religious festivals. But why? Why can't we hang out when we are talking about jobs? Why can't we hang out when we are talking about public commons? Why can't we hang out when we are talking about the river? And which is why, to humanize marginalized or minority sections of society, you have to talk to them about their daily dreams and aspirations. You have to ask them about, so what do you think about your children's future? What do you think about your career? What do you think about how insurance rates have gone up 50-60% in the past 7-8 years? And you realize after talking to them that they have the exact same dreams, aspirations, fears that anybody else in this country, in this society has. 99% of their mind space is about education, admission, health, entertainment. And of course, they have some extra fears that majority populations or sections of society don't have. So stop celebrating only Eid together or just saying, we have Shirkurma together. To me, that doesn't make sense. We need to do much more than that. I was the keynote speaker at an atheist meet back in 2023, 2 years ago. One of the first speakers of that was Dr. Sriram Lagu, a great actor, as well as one of the foremost rationalists in the country has ever seen. So you can see how these public programs have gone down the hill that Dr. Sriram Lagu, and then many years later, Sangram Khopde goes and speaks there. I don't know what's going to happen to this conference after this because it's all downhill. Iske baad. But I realized that the problem with atheists, for example, is that they're not able to get more numbers for their cause. You know why? Lot of reasons. But when I ask them, do you have a festival for atheists? No. Do you have get-togethers not to talk about atheism, but just to come together? No. When you're celebrating like an atheist meet, did you buy new clothes to come for the atheist meet? No. So if you don't have rituals, if you don't have celebrations, then why will people join you? Because that's a very basic human need. So understand what is the core human need that is not being addressed, and address that through your communication. Oh, this is a great one. Who's a better driver, girl or boy? How many think that the boys are better drivers? Put their hand up. And be frank, nobody's going to judge you. Boys are better drivers? Yeah. Okay, so we have about 10 truthful boys here. How many think girls are better drivers? Oh, great. The rest are saying, I'm just not going to take sides at all. So I did a debate on this where instead of addressing, oh, how many accidents? Oh, let's see who drives how. Oh, I said, what do you mean better driver? What do you mean by a better driver? Reframe the entire debate. Because then suddenly we realize that the drivers who are driving rashly are more men, causing accidents more men, coming from wrong side more men. So then clearly girls are better drivers. Are girls clap na loudly. I was expecting this to get a standing ovation. Okay, so a bunch of ideas like this. I'm just going to skip through. Making videos is very important. Use social media, but don't give up on traditional media. So in 2024, I asked for a parliamentary election ticket from my city of Pune. And I thought my videos are getting 4 lakh, 5 lakh views, right? Voters are only 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs actually come out and vote. But nobody was taking my campaign seriously. You know why? Because the medium is the message. I was using only social media. My campaign took off only when I put this out. Right? So some of my karyakartas put out this 6x3 hoarding across the city, some 300 of these things. And that's when people said, oh, now he's a serious political contender. Why? Because the medium is the message. Should we be putting out these nylon things up and all is a completely different issue. In my defense, it was my party workers and not me who did this. So you have to figure out where to reach your audiences. And I will leave you with some homework from my side. My communication challenge now is to get the 17% of Pune, 17% of Pune's population is Brahmin. I want to get them to care about not just the hill and the river saving movement that I am part of, that we are all part of, especially the upper middle class, the higher echelons of Pune's society and the Brahmins. I want to get them to care about also the plight of the Muslims in Pune. I haven't cracked this at all, but this is a challenge that I am working on. These are things that we all should be working on and thinking about as we talk about rights. And like I always end all of my things with, you don't need to influence all 100% of people or even 50% of people. Erika Chenoweth did a great study which says that at the peak of a social or political movement, if you have 3.5% at the peak, people out on the streets, 3.5% of that population, of that city, of that mohalla, of that country, then that political social movement is successful. 3.5% is 1 in 30 people. So I would urge you to slice your community, your city, your town, your village, your college into 3.5%. Identify those people and get them to change. I'm sure you'll succeed. Thanks. All the very best.
I really apologize to the audience of having to cut Sangramji short. We sure will have more time in the questions. But, you know, Sangramji, what you said and the importance of imagination. I mean, that's something that Avtar Singh Pash had said in his poem. सबसे खतरनाक होता है हमारे सपनों का मर जाना. सुबह उठ के काम जाना और शाम को काम से घर लौटना सबसे खतरनाक होता है हमारे सपनों का मर जाना. But also there's another thing. In terms of when you talk about dreams, we need to also understand Engels' criticism of the utopian socialist project and how people would come together and have these dreams of setting up communities in which you know, there would be no exploitation, they would live in harmony with each other. And Engels' critique was that socialism has to be both utopian and scientific. So, you know, and that's what I think is emerging from the kind of inputs that you've shared with us. And I thank you very much for it. And I will look forward to more interactions during the question hour. Ma'am, please, may I request you to give your inputs? This is Anjali ji.
So, hi everyone. That was a very good presentation. Now I'm going to bore you a bit. And before I start, I must say something that I noted and I felt very good about it. I didn't see any plastic bottles here, and I'm coming from Delhi. I'm so used to seeing those little plastic bottles at seminars. This is indeed a very good thing. So yeah. So I'm here to talk about how media, the news media, shapes urban spaces, our cities. And I don't think there's any debate on this, that cities are where India's future is being built. A large number of people are moving to cities. The cities are growing like anything at an unprecedented pace, something we have never witnessed before. And why are they moving? They're moving for a better life, like, you know, for economic reasons, to get a job. But are they really getting it? Because these cities are also the spaces where the inequalities are most amplified. And what we see of those inequalities, those issues, that depends on what the media brings out to you. So a pothole is just a pothole until someone falls into it and it becomes news. And sadly in Delhi, recently we've had, like in February and March, a series of incidents where people have fallen into pits and potholes and died. And it became news only after they fell into it and they died. No one went there before that to see, oh, okay, there's this DJB pit, it's just lying open. Maybe we should report about it. Because in a mainstream media, a lot of times in a newspaper or a news channel, that particular news is also competing with political news, with other kind of, like, you know, reporting. So media is crucial for urban issues to come out, just as it is crucial for democracy overall. And I think there's no dispute on that. We call media one of the pillars of democracy. How we are seeing media today is another thing. Like, there are a lot of issues which I'm sure people here are aware of. So I would first like to start by quoting a couple of reports which highlight the volume at which our cities are growing. And this report that I'm quoting, it's a report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Urban Development and Housing. And it says that India's urban landscape is changing rapidly, with existing cities becoming denser and new suburban and peri-urban centers expanding at an unprecedented pace. So India's urban population in 1901 was just 25.9 million. In 2011, which was the last census, it was 377 million. By the time we are in 2036, it is expected to be 594 million. And by 2047, which is that landmark that we have fixed for ourselves, by 47, it is projected that 50% of India's population would be living in cities. And cities will contribute almost 80% to the GDP. So we all have been saying this all our lives. We all have been hearing this all our lives, that India lives in its villages, but that is changing. And the change that is happening, the rising share of urban population, it is not just a demographic shift. It is a structural transformation of Indian economy that is happening today. So now coming back to this report, it highlights that while there is rapid urbanization, existing infrastructure is under strain and often inadequate to meet the growing demands for housing, drinking water, sanitation, waste management, drainage, basic things. efficient public transport, the basic bijli pani sadak. So while people are moving to cities for a better life, it is not necessarily they are getting a better life. And that's a big question because more and more people are going to move to the cities. So at the same time, new urban areas, they require planned and sustained investment to ensure balanced and sustainable development. This is an observation from the report. So the real challenge before the government is to transform cities into livable, inclusive, and sustainable growth engines, not just growth engines, while meeting the basic needs and expectations of the expanding urban population. Now, that same report also quotes the Secretary of Urban and Housing Ministry, and here I'm quoting him. While the rapid urbanization brings new opportunities for growth, it also poses several challenges. Comprehensive development of the physical, institutional, social, and economic infrastructure is required to sustain this urban growth. The transition has not been accompanied by commensurate increase in the supply of basic urban services, which is a challenge that we are collectively facing. The challenge of urbanization in India is to ensure that service delivery occurs at enhanced minimum standards. So this is the secretary saying. So clearly, everyone is identifying that there's a serious problem. But then another aspect of this is that urban planning comes under the state, comes under the local governance bodies, and center is mostly in a guiding role. So, yeah, here I would like to mention this very tragic incident from 2024 in Delhi. There was a lot of rain happening in Delhi and there was flooding and 3 UPSC aspirants died. There was a coaching center being run in the basement of a building, which is illegal. So the flooding happened because there were heavy rains and a nearby drain overflowed and there was a probe done. And what was the finding of the probe? There were multiple agencies that had failed. The MCD, it allowed the illegal use of the basement as a library or as a coaching center. And the encroachments on the stormwater drain, they were ignored. The drain had not been desilted for years. So all these multiple agencies failed, and only when this one incident occurred, it came to attention of people that, yeah, something wrong has happened, and there was a lot of outrage. But again, once something has happened, you can't undo it. So it shows that, it was a systemic governance failure, and that is what keeps happening. So when we look at the allocation for the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry, it's 9th amongst the major ministries. But at the same time, the allocation is just 0.24% of the GDP in the current fiscal. So it kind of reflects that while we are giving a lot of importance to cities, maybe the resources that are being allocated are not enough or not being done in a proper way. So, yeah, and as many as 53 cities in India were million plus in 2011 when the last census were done. Now it's expected that there are 62 to 63 cities with million plus population. So while there are government schemes for housing, water, everything, it's not sufficient. Now here I will come to another report. It was called Shaping Urban India by Design, Not by Default. And this highlights actually a lot of things that are going wrong. So it says that India is, while our urban population is growing, in the livability index, we are not doing that well. We are behind many other countries. It says housing is increasingly unaffordable. Daily commutes are longer and more stressful on roads that are congested, poorly maintained, and often unsafe. Green spaces are disappearing, flooding is more frequent and severe, and air quality is declining. It further adds, these are not minor inconvenience. They result in poor health and well-being, rising healthcare cost, lost productivity, and climate vulnerability. Now, again, climate vulnerability is one of the very big factors. And yeah, as it was said here earlier, that, these highly dense urban settlements, they also become heat engines. Delhi, over the last, I've been living in Delhi for 20 years, and the summers every year are worse than the last year. A lot of people were forced to buy ACs because you can't survive without one in Delhi summers anymore. And there's a huge population for that. Buying an AC is not even an option. So, yeah, and this report also highlights that approximately 8.36 lakh crores have been invested in cities since 2015. And still we have this kind of poor standard of living because fragmented governance, planning models that we implement are very uniform. We will have the same wonderful Delhi for Bombay, maybe for Pune, for Patna. I come from Patna. Patna is becoming more and more like Delhi every day. So it also notes that India is more urbanized. but less productive than it should be. So our urban population is not able to be as productive as it can be. And this is like from a very economic perspective. And the human side to it is also there, that, people are living in substandard conditions. Those are not conditions in which human beings should live. So these are the contradictions that are there in our cities, existing in our cities. So biggest problem is that the cities have evolved. They have not been developed. Buildings spring up, right? So urban expansion is also happening beyond metros. It's no longer like only Delhi is growing or Bombay is growing. I'm from Patna. The city has grown over last 2 decades. And how has it grown? The agricultural land around the city is now, construction is there all over. The other thing that is happening is that the old houses that were there in the cities, they are giving it to builders. Builders are constructing, multi-storied buildings on that. No one cares whether there's drainage that can handle, where there was one house, now there are like 20 flats. So can the city really handle that? There's not much thought being given to it. So, so similar stories, I think, are there across different cities in India. And yeah, like people who are moving to these cities, again, that is also a very important factor, that why are people moving to cities? It is because there's distress in rural areas. They're not able to earn a living. It's also not always a choice. You are being forced to go to a city to earn a living. And these inequalities that I'm talking about. So when are the times when we see these inequalities the most? For example, the COVID-19 lockdown was a time when these inequalities were totally exposed, because the only people who were outside, who were on the roads, were the more desperate, the most vulnerable, the migrant workers. They walked back home, they took trains. We don't know how many reached their homes, how many came back. The numbers, we don't have that. So that was kind of a reality check. It should have been a reality check, that what is it that our urban spaces are really facing. So now, so basically we have been used to having a crisis-based governance. So when we talk about urbanization or rethinking of urbanization, often it feels like there's limited original thinking. And, when a crisis happens, something is done, or like when there are protests or something, as it was said, little action is taken. But for the long term, are there policy changes being made? That's a big question. So that is where the role of media comes in. So media is, of course, one of the pillars of the democracy. And in this country, media is also very urban in its nature. So you would expect that, okay, all media houses are based in one city or the other. National media is based in Delhi. So maybe these issues should be the most important, because as a citizen, what is most important for me? That, the road in front of my house, there should be no waterlogging. But even as a journalist, can I write just about the road in front of my house? Not necessarily. So yes, of course, newspapers cover local issues, TV channels cover civic issues. But those coverages are, also have their own biases. They are sometimes limited in its nature. So newspapers always have dedicated local pages where you will see stories of local issues. A lot of time there also that space is taken by what is happening from the government side, what an agency is doing, what are their plans. Now, whether it gets implemented on the ground or not, that is something that also needs to be followed up. So, and this Bijli Sadak Pani, these are civic issues, but these are also political issues, but they become political issues only when media shows it. I may have Delhi survives on bottled water. There, barely any people in Delhi who drink the water that comes from the supply. But there are areas where there's no water supply, so there are tankers, and people buy those Bisleri bottles to drink, and they use the tanker water in their homes. But does it get highlighted as much? Maybe not. So yeah. So, and again, your experiences in a city are shaped by a lot of factors. What is your caste? What is your religion? What is your gender? What is your economic bracket that you're living in? And these factors shape how you see the city. So maybe I am living in a place where I cannot see that Delhi is actually a city of slums. I may think that, oh, Delhi is a very beautiful city. It has this beautiful Lutyens Delhi, broad roads, big buildings, new government buildings are coming up. I think there are 8 Kartavya Bhavans and whatnot, and Seva Tirth and all. So yeah, but at the same time, we also have a huge number of population living in slums that have been a lot of demolitions that have taken place in Delhi over the last 1 year. Where are those people living? So it's a kind of a crisis. It's a perpetual crisis. You are a poor person living in a city, you don't know when you will be thrown out. So yeah, here I will come back to the biases that a lot of times we are not able to see certain things, like, again, during the COVID lockdown, so along the bank of Yamuna in Delhi, there are a lot of settlements. Now a lot of them have been vacated. But at that point in time, because everything was locked, they were on the banks of Yamuna, but they didn't have drinking water because there were no tankers coming, there was no supply, right? And another example I would give, that if when media does something, how it impacts. So on one of my tours to Maharashtra, I came across this article in Sakar Times. It's a very well-known newspaper of Maharashtra. So what they did was they had sent their reporters to all police stations in the night, and they did a wonderful story with a big picture of a policeman sleeping on a table. And that one picture in itself tells such a big story about the city. Like, how do you expect law and order if the police is sleeping in the night? So media, when it takes up issues, it can make a difference, but it's also not necessary. For example, media has been writing about Yamuna pollution since forever. We are talking about air pollution, but doesn't mean that it has gone down, gone away. So that is also because, when the AQI would be bad, we will talk about it a lot. When the AQI becomes better, we forget it. So what needs to be done is that a sustained coverage of urban issues, civic issues from different perspectives, from caste lens, from gender lens, from the lens of religion. And one thing, for that, one is engaging with the media, engaging with the mainstream media, the reporters. There are usually beat reporters everywhere. So possibly, that is one way. And the other is, of course, social media. Now, a lot of us, we just, sometimes mindlessly scroll reels, and not a very good thing to do, because every time we're doing it, we're actually benefiting Meta. But yeah, so hyper local reporting, that is, I think, something that is really required. And not just hyper local reporting, it has to be a community based initiative. So a community in my colony, my community should be concerned that what is happening. Do we have proper roads? Is the water coming? No one will be more concerned about it than my community. And that is, I think, something that needs to be looked out. I'll give an example of a platform called Okhla Times. They report on the Okhla area in Delhi, and they do wonderful reporting. So they will highlight that, okay, there's drainage water on the road. Mainstream media may not be covering it, but they are highlighting it. So I think that is somewhere that this is something that needs to be seriously looked at, that can we develop these community-based platforms or community-based, which can interact with mainstream media also, maybe to get these things highlighted, or have dedicated channels which are reporting these issues. It's not an easy job, because of course on social media we know that someday they come and shut your channel, you can't do anything about it. So I think a lot more debate is needed, a lot more discussion is needed on how do these issues get highlighted, because this is essentially what will be deciding our future, which will how we are going to live. So I will leave you with that, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjali ji, for focusing more on the scientific aspects of the communication topics that we're talking about. You talked about how the news cycle gets initiated by the disaster. So the pothole may be there, but the news picks it up when somebody falls in it and injures themselves. And you spoke about how there's a need for a sustained kind of a reporting on the issue, because even once the disaster is reported, like it was like the way the COVID-19 visibilized the issues of migrant labor and the issues of vulnerable city makers, we don't seem to have learned the lessons. So there's a need for sustained reporting on it. You spoke about the need to look in terms of social media, the need to look at community-based communication, the new the hyper-local reporting. And you also spoke about the importance of the visual image, which is a very good segue to our next speaker, Sri Devi ji. She's over here, because she's going to speak about this cinematic, the way cinema has portrayed the city. Sri Devi ji, please a warm round of applause to our speakers who've spoken in the past, and Sri Devi ji who's coming. Please.
respected dais, and dear friends, teachers. She already interestingly portrayed about the city crisis in the lens of media. So here, I think my take is mainly the issues of city in the lens of cinema. How our consciousness is structured and mediated by cinema. That is my focus. And for this, I'm titled as Cinema as Urban Praxis. Then this praxis is, in this term, it is not the theoretically codified praxis. Rather, it is mobilized as praxis itself. It's very dialectical relation of praxis. So in this session, we, in the many, I didn't heard the others, what they discussed about. But what I understand that this session is mainly examine about how urban governance is shaped only through the infrastructure and services, but also through the narrative power and regulatory authority. So building on this, my take is focuses on the narrative power of media, particularly cinema, in constructing the idea of city. How cinema is constructing a city narrative, or how cinema is portraying a city. That is my main concern. Actually, cinema do not merely represent a city. Instead, they actively produce and circulate a city. And the critical question is, in the construction of city, like who is representing in it, and whose city is ultimately is being constructed. That is the main argument of my paper. So cinema should not be understand merely as a medium of the representation of city. Rather, it operates as an active agent in the production of urban life. So since the like inception of cinema, we can see that through the city images, like from the first cinema, like we have seen that the first cinema is the arrival of train at Parachi station. The cinema itself is showing the visuals of city, and we can see that the train, which shows the buildings and the images of city, we can see in the first cinema itself. So the praxis here, it intervenes multiple ways, like it construct and circulate ways of seeing and thinking about city. And another one is it influences how urban policies and future are imagined through cinema. And it provides a space where forms of resistance, dissent, and alternative urban narratives emerge. So we can say that cinema is not just a reflective surface, but a dynamic site of action, reflection, and transformation, where urban reality is continuously negotiated and configured. So, as I said, cinema emerged within the milieu of like urban atmosphere as a product of city, and it circuits in capital, actually. So it also an aesthetic medium and an industry driven by the market forces. The narratives are often shaped by both popular and elite imaginaries, reproducing dominant ideological framework that structure urban representation. These representations are not neutral, but selective. This representation need to be critically analyzed. Cinema's powerful capacity to naturalize constructed reality and pursued audience to perceive them as truth. That is actually a point we have to look into it. because cinema construct an image of city, and cinema invite the audience to perceive them as truth. So cinema has the capacity to make us believe that what is truth. So what I am telling is all is a constructed image, and it seems to be real. So we are living in the world of images. We construct image of world, and more significantly, we often live within the world of images. It is argued by some contemporary theorists that the world of images have become our lived world today. The postmodern thinker Rand Bodila once said that the city seems to have stepped out of movies. Now we can feel that even when we are looking into the Kochi, we can see that it is looking exactly like a cinematic city. So to grasp its secret, you should not begin with the city and move inwards to the screen. You should begin with the screen and move outward to the city. The city around us seems to have stepped out of cinema itself. Cinema, from its very inception, has been deeply intertwined with the experience of city that I have mentioned earlier. Emerging alongside modern urban life, the film became one of the primary medium through which the rhythm, anxieties, and imaginaries of cities were visualized and narrated. Rather than merely documented urban spaces, cinema actively constructs city images shaped by prevailing cultural, political, and ideological notions about what city is and what it represents. This is very important to look into it, that what is city? Cinema repeatedly showing a particular images and a particular notion about city, and whose city is that and what it represents and who are the marginalized. These we have to look into it. So in the beginning of the film history, early films such as Berlin Symphony of Great City, this is the story of Berlin City. The film is directed by Walter Ruttmann, captured the modern city as a site of movement, speed, and industrial rhythm. Presenting what he presents is the urban life as a dynamic, almost a mechanical spectacle. And and at the same time, the avant-garde movie, like the award movie, what we are, the experimental cinema, where the city representation is a bit different, where we can see that city is they represent city as an utopian project. Were they allaying the urban transformation with some ideological aspiration, like the marginalized life, they are showcasing it. And when we are coming into the post-war neo-realist film, there are many films like Germany Year Zero and Bicycle Thieves, Victorio De Sicas, and we can see that city as a site of crisis, poverty, and a kind of moral struggles that we can see in these films. Here, the urban space no longer a symbol of progress, but a terrain of survival, reflecting a socio-economic realities of post-war Europe. So these kind of movies has a different take on cinema. They showcase the crisis of and the survival of urbanity, urban life. Later, when opposed to our cinema, when we are coming into the, you might have seen that Blade Runner, Matrix, there are many movies like that. Even in the Spider-Man, we can see that a different kind of movie, city, where the city become little bit dystopian and dense and fragmented, technologically saturated, embodying the fear of dehumanizing, surveillance, and the late capitalist excess, all are seen in this post-war cinema. Slowly, the city become a dystopian space. We can call it as a noir cinema, noir city, because a dark city started to emerge the post-war films. Taken together, these films demonstrate the city images in cinema are never a neutral representation. They are historically produced and ideologically charged constructions. the way in which cities are imaged, whether as a site of modernity, alienation, utopia, or dystopia, reveals the shifting socio-political context in which films are made. So, this analyzing cinematic city allows us to trace not only the evolution of film and the narration, but also underlying ideologies, ideological framework that shaped our understanding of urban life. So we have to be critical about our understanding of urban life because we are seeing the city all around us. We are speaking about the city. We are speaking about the crisis of the city, but the notion of city itself to a point, like since the development of cinema, it might be somehow constructed by cinema. So it is, we are very much influenced by the cinematic construction of city. So we have to be more critical about when we are making any kind of policies about city. So when film is approached as a sociological text, when we are taking film as a sociological text, a fundamental tension emerges. And what is this? Is that the cinematic narration is inherently a constructed one. And it is a constructed form and shaped by the aesthetic of ideological, and there are some ideological, and the popular ideology might be always stand with the capital and the elite people. So this popular like narration always there in cinema. Yet this constructedness, cinema often operated as a homo-social evidence also. I will tell you an example. There is a legal dispute happened between Kerala Road Transport Corporation, KSRTC, and Karnataka Road Transport Corporation. So what is the dispute? That the abbreviation of KSRTC, who prior used. So this was this dispute. So what Kerala did is we presented a cinema as a document in the court. That is a movie called Kannur Deluxe. In that movie, the KSRTC logo and the abbreviation of KSRTC is very evident. So this presented as a document in the court. So yeah, like. So this contribute to Kerala's claim. So we can say that in this instance, what I said, this instance which demonstrates cinema function as a social document as well within the institutional framework. And it like simultaneously produces and circulate. Okay, sorry. So I'm skipping some of my points. So when we are thinking about city in Kerala, especially in Kerala, my examples are from Kerala. The city, like actually the first city, Kerala, we cannot see that there is a such evident city around us in the earlier time. And slowly there is a urbanization process happened along with cinema. Earlier Malayalam cinema, we can see that the early Malayalam cinema, like we can see Madras was the template city of Malayalis. All the Malayali people who are migrated to Madras for some job opportunity and all, they migrated to like Madras. From there, all our representations was Madras first. Then it comes to Mumbai, and our villain came from Mumbai. In Malayalam cinema, all our villains came from Mumbai. And after that, the Kochi became that dystopian city. And there are many cinema films like even like Big B. There are many cinema we can see in that sense. So the urban anonymity is the cinematic villain actually. So that is an interesting thing that I wanted to tell you, that cinematic construction of urban space. The cinematic narrative do not depict urban landscape. They actively construct what may be called cinematic city through the layered representational strategies. So the villain's association with the city is not incidental. It is reflected the broader cinematic imagination that frame the urban as a site of uncertainty, danger, and moral ambiguity. So when we are looking into the cinema, most of the villain, the dark spots of city and the dark spaces of city, unwanted spaces, and many alleys of city, we can see that it is the spot of criminal activities in the city. Only in cinema, mainly in cinema. I am speaking about the cinematic city. It is a virtual city. I'm not comparing with the real city. You take it as a cinematic city. So, the hero often embodies so we can see that these spaces, basically in city, the Cheri slums usually represented as a site of crime, violence, and moral danger. Film construct these spaces as a zone of suspicion. Actually, when a space is repeatedly imagined as dangerous, policies begin to treat it as a problem to be controlled. When we are repeatedly representing through cinema, the city space is always a zone of dangerous. In city, the Cheri slums are always represented as a dangerous zone. So especially when we are making policy, like urban policies, like instead of welfare and housing justice and labor recognition, film showcases surveillance, policing, and eviction. So this become a consciousness of the audience also. Then when the Michel Foucault shows power work through how spaces are seen and categorized. When a place is marked as dark, it becomes the target of discipline and punished. So the the slums become a hyper visible threat instead of the invisible as a living space. So it has to be look as a living space instead that we look into this space as a threat or a suspicious stone. And when the policy should not simply identify it as a dark spot in the city, because the idea of darkness itself is socially constructed. And what is, when we are like thinking about what is dark, is poor, marginalized, and unorganized labor and caste market. And so always this urban street life in cinema frequently constructed through the discourse of danger and uncertainty. Always the street life is put into the dangerous zone, always cinema. Were the marginal spaces and subject rendered as inherently threatening. All the marginal people and even the margin landscape of city. Some areas are always put into the dangerous space. Beggars and the urban poor are often coded as suspicious or criminal, while alleys, underpass, and the waste disposal spaces, all the spaces become recurring visual markers of crime in cinema. So it affect our policy making. So when we are thinking about policy and about a city development, we have to consider the cultural structuring or the making the cultural consciousness of narrative medium such as cinema and the other media. Thank you.
Thank you, Sridevi ji, to talking about the cinematic representation of the city. And, there is quite a lot of work on this. And Sridevi ji, there's also a question of, there's been a change in the way cinema depicts the city. Because just as the way there's been a change in the dominant discourse in cinema, because cinema at one point of time had a very progressive national nation building role to play at one point of time, which it seems to have interpreting it in a different way nowadays. So in the initial period, you had cinemas which had a very sympathetic, sort of approach towards the new migrant, to the city workers. I mean, we can think of Do Bigha Zameen, we can think of Anadi, we can think of Gaman, where the taxi driver, we can think of Disha, where there's a person who works in a textile mill. We can also think of Albert Pinto Ko Gussa Kyun Aata Hai, where the whole Bombay textile mill strike has been presented in such a very sympathetic way. And then we look today at the way in which, and not just today, there's been a certain period from which you've got a different type of a cinema, even from Salam Mumbai, where you have these spaces being put as more criminal. We have the whole Slumdog Millionaire, which won the Oscar and is much celebrated. But over there also, rather than solidarity, what it picks up is the criminality of the slum. We also see, even in progressive films like Black Friday, where these areas are now seen as places where, like these are terror havens. So there's a certain way in which what you said was very good, is that we need to recognize the way cinema tends to create a narrative of the city and be, guard of it. I mean, our P.K. Das was over here. There was a very lovely documentary film made based on the struggle of the Nawara huts called Hamara Sheher by Anand Patwardhan, which spoke about the whole issue of city and housing. That's documentaries. So that may be a different dimension, but in terms of popular cinema, this trend certainly is there. So I do apologize again to you for cutting Sridevi down, because I wanted to get some time for some interaction. We've got 15 minutes and there's one hand which has been stretched over there and one Vidika and three. Let's take 3 questions here. Yeah, that was the first hand. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all of you for your wonderful speeches. My name is Vidika. I'm a mental health researcher based out of Delhi. My question is about language as it is and rhetoric as it is used in media, in popular forms of media, journalism, obviously, cinema, radio as well, and how language, since we're here talking about things like solidarity and improving democracy and local democracy, particularly at a very hyper-local level, I was more wondering on what your thoughts were on how we can use language to further those causes, particularly when combating against very often and very persistent marginalization or dehumanization through language that occurs of urban communities. I just wanted to know your thoughts, all 3 of you, on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is similar to her question, because in a conference or workshop like this, when are we going to shift from, binary gender language to more inclusive, alternatives? We talk about use pronouns like him or her, we use like boys and girls. In our country, a regressive trans bill has been passed in Lok Sabha, and our cisheads, are we extending solidarity or non-binary trans communities? I think we can do better when we use language as a medium of communication. When we keep cultivating, the binary, the notion of binary, when are we going to change, like be a bit more inclusive? I want to be included. I identify as a non-binary. So I urge, we should use language which is more kind. We should use language which is more like, give some sort of like, oh yeah, I belong. And another thing, I wanted to appreciate the last, sorry, I forgot your name, like Sridevi. It is very important, from my experience, the collective consciousness. There is a movie called Mudalvan, Nayak. It is also, they showed that in the movie, this girl will be coming and crying, and then you'll be like, okay, people from slums harassed me. People from slums, they are doing drugs and everything. That collective consciousness is still there. I've been working in this development sector for the past 1 decade. 2 years back, the director, she hold a high authority in a post. She talks about, I work in Kannagi Nagar, you know, this place is famous for drugs and everything. That is the collective consciousness that we keep cultivating it. So don't take cinema as just an entertainment medium. It is a mode of, you know, just see through the eyes, see through the lived in experience of marginalized communities. It is keep on harassing. So I urge people to show solidarity, and when we use language, yeah, please do that. Thank you. Thanks a lot for bringing that on.
I agree with what they're saying. So language. Oh, okay, sure.
Hello, my name is Adi. I'm from MGU itself. So I'll try to keep my question short, but essentially, particularly within the past 10 or 14 years itself, I've seen a rather drastic shift in the narratives that are being peddled on a platform as big as Bollywood. I mean, I'm talking about the films such as Kerala Story 1, 2, and even Dhurandhar. I mean, the narratives and the way the language is used and employed to particularly target minorities is quite it's I don't have words for it. And essentially, my question is more towards Sangram sir. You had said about humanizing the other. So how can we, the ordinary citizens with some semblance of empathy and rational thinking, hopefully, can fight back against such brutal narratives? Thank you.
Right. So the only way to counter propaganda, I was under the illusion for many years that to counter propaganda, you have to have counter propaganda. So if they have propaganda, then we have to step up our efforts too. So that, I mean, that you have to do that. You have to answer all of their propaganda. You have to bring the truth out. But I've realized after 24 years in the media, as well as a couple of decades in working in political parties as well, is that nothing beats one-on-one communication. So if you're an ally of any kind of marginalized community, you can't just talk about it. That's the basic, and that's the minimum that's expected from you. You have to hit the streets. You have to go out there and meet people. So you will have to, for example, take your cohort, your friends, your family, and go and meet people from other religions. There's no substitute to that. You have to spend time with them. You have to share a meal with them. You have to have deep conversations. So the idea, so this, I used to think that, you know, I'll say something on the radio and the entire city will be transformed. No, I mean, of course, people listen and some people are changed, but you have to meet people where they are. You have to take your people and talk about the most mundane and the most boring things in life, and you realize that everybody is just as boring as everybody else, or everybody is just as interesting as everybody else. So nothing can substitute for physical, one-on-one, face-to-face meetings. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, so what I would like to say is, first of all, yeah, I agree we should, use better pronouns and we should be more inclusive. And as for the trans bill, yesterday it was passed in Lok Sabha. This Sunday we had a huge meeting in Press Club of India against the bill, and I don't know why government is rushing it. And of course, it's a huge setback, and that's also a part of like urban issues, because the LGBTQI community, they are. We don't even talk about them unless, I mean, so much in our regular, when we are talking about gender issues, we don't talk about that. So yeah, perhaps like much more needs to be done. As far as the role of language is concerned, I totally agree. And yeah, sometimes you'll see that media would give out a particular name when a crime has happened, if the religion is a certain religion, and they'll skip the name. We see all these stories where say, oh, that guy got married and then or killed his girlfriend. But if it's the same religion, then it doesn't become such a big issue. Again, in Delhi, this incident happened in Uttam Nagar, and this is again related to urban issues. So these are very densely populated areas. People live very close. Life is stressful. People fight. So there was some fight, and one guy was killed, and that became a huge communal issue because the other side was Muslims and they were Hindus. They could have been, both sides could have been Hindus. It's an issue of the lifestyle in the city, which is it's a subhuman lifestyle. You fight with your neighbors. Someone is washing their house, water comes to your house, you go and fight, and those fights really blow out. But again, like, it's language. It gives a different lens to it, and then it blows out. And yeah, I mean, again, the narrative in the cinema, yeah, we are seeing a huge shift, but I think you will be the better.
And my solidarity, first I say my solidarity with this, like this fight. And this, we have to look into another serious issue, that how the LGBTQ community is represented in cinema, actually, transgender community. That is another important thing. We have to look into it. Always, cinema represent heteronormative, life and people. So the cinematic representation is always heteronormative and the patriarchal. So we have to see, and when more than the popular cinema, how it is make the binaries always, and the transgender is always a villain. And sorry to say that, it's always represented as a, like, when many cinema repeatedly showing it as always. The thing is that the structure of cinema itself is like, it's a hero's journey. Hero, heroine, and a villain. So the villain might be somewhere from slums or some from marginalized people, and like that always represent. So we have to make counter narratives. Then cinema is very much liberated and democratized in a way that we all have this phone. So we can also shoot some critical cinema in that sense, like a parallel cinema. We can say that even we can shoot reels, and also we have to do the counter narratives that we can only do as a when we are thinking about it, what we can do. That is another way, but it's a capital flaw. The always good making will come, like the Durandar kind of cinematic shock will come. So it is highly cinematic also. So there is no way to counter. Even the counter narrative will be silent also. No one will see it actually. We will be influenced by the cinematic narratives and the extravagance of light, color, and structures of cinema. So we will be always in the structures of cinema. So we would be more vigilant when we are looking into the cinema and looking into an image.
And if any one of you plans to make that kind of a cinema, then I am available. I can give out my dates.
Okay. So there's another question over there. Two questions at a time? Please.
Yes. So we agree that social media echo chambers are a reality that we have to deal with. So is there any possibility that we can use this tool for inclusive urbanism as a digital tool that can supplement what is going on the ground? And the second question is, it's more of a comment. If we can actually talk about cinema as a revolutionary force, we have to find the interaction between political thought and the commercial aspect. So I would invite the audience to watch a movie called Kamattipadam, which talks about the history of the city of Kochi. So it threads that fine line. It's commercial and politically active at the same time. So people, if they should think beyond the glamour of heteronormative or polarizing cinemas, they should find that balance between what can be good cinematically, at the same time how well it can say a counter narrative. Yeah.
So it was very interesting session. So what I have is much more of a commentary rather than a question. Basically, because of Sangram sir's presentation, when I heard it, it had very much similarities with Harare's writing on how information and control works. So in his writings, he talks about information is power, not necessarily because what in the information is said is truth, but because it's fiction. It's a myth that people believe in. So through this information, people they control the mass group of people. And I think this can also be applied into the case of city governance and how city governance plays into this, and how people become a statistics because of it. Because from personal trust, it transfers to system trust. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to say is that it becomes, it becomes an infrastructure of imagined order. So I think it was very interesting, and your solutions you also bring up, especially through the hyper-localized narratives that Anjali ma'am talked about, and how we need to work on the ground itself is very much interesting. And the case of cinema itself, and how counter narratives are very much important, because those who control the narratives ultimately control how systems are run. So I think it was very interesting session.
I'll quickly answer your thing. I increasingly don't believe that making a great piece of art or argument, I think all art should be an argument, but making a great piece of art, whether it's a written article, whether it's a radio program, whether it's a report, whether it's reportage or films, or a great social media post, whether it's a video or whatever, I don't think it changes minds. I'm sorry, it sounds very cynical, but there is no evidence that it changes minds. What it does is it preaches to the choir, which is also important. So your ranks, your ideologically, your brethren, sisters, they have to know that these are our arguments and that there are other people who think like us. So that's important. But I don't think it changes minds. Yeah? I think minds are only changed when you live together, when you work together, when you do things together. You have to come on the streets to change minds. That's what I believe. So I'm not spending too much time on that. Thanks.
But I have another. While seeing the movies, as you said, Kamattipadam, it always shows this, the urbanization process, and when this Cheri become the site of criminal activities, how it is changed. That transformation is beautifully pictured in that movie. At the same time, the movie is portrayed the Ganga. You can see that he's a very beautiful, like looking. The Manigandan also, he's a